The ninth of, I think this is the ninth. The reason why I was trying to calculate the date here was because I know the fight day. I'm a fight fan, so I know the fight day was Saturday. I don't miss any boxing matches. So I know that was on the 7th, will be 2 days later, so I can add that up. We're back here again at the studio, allpointstv.com. Glad to see all of you out there and see this camera here. John was telling me before the program started, this camera, we have so many cameras in here, and this camera that I'm looking at now splits 4 different ways. We had 4 different feeds going out, and that's 2 channels of, let's see, there's Rumble, there's 1 channel, there's 2 channels of Facebook, and one is, what is the other one there? We have one that goes up on Alphonse TV channel for Facebook, also Talk channel for Facebook. Also, we go up on Rumble, RUMBLE, and we are going to try YouTube, see if they'll. YouTube, you stay put. You stop canceling us. We encourage people to post it, like share it, share it, like you go online to Facebook, on your Facebook page, share it from there. Yeah. And we'll probably share the Rumble link there. Yeah, they're telling me I need to promote my page a lot more. I was assuming that because I post every day, that was pretty much advertising the fact that I'm out there. But I will, in fact, make some other overtures on the site itself and try to get more people to come into this arena. We're trying to say something to the country, and we are trying to, and we think we are, we're trying to be a positive influence, and anything we can do to help the country get stronger and better and have more merit behind what it does, I would like to certainly be a part of that. Anyway, we are back again here, and we're glad to see everything up and running, and the technicians are in their places. And we're here for another hour. We'll be here from 2 o'clock to 3. And you can catch us also on the other sites John just mentioned after the program is over, because it is taped and is up for reviewing at your pleasure. I want to thank everybody that tunes us in. We know you're very busy and you have a lot of things to do with your time. We value that time that you spend with us, and we really want to thank you for tuning us in on Mondays. I want to say a few things to finish up what I was talking about last week. I just get frustrated in reading things by people like Mark Levine and others that come up here and say, I was reading Mark Levine's comment the other day, and he was saying these are impeachable offenses. And I bring the Constitution to the studio each time we meet because I want to say how we seem to be just dismissing the document even while talking about it. And when you say things like these are impeachable offenses, I just want to ask, where are they getting that from? They're not getting it from the Constitution, because the Constitution does not talk about what impeachable offenses are. It's not in there. They can't show it to me. It doesn't belong. It's not in the document. The framers did not make a mistake by not putting it in there. They knew what they were doing and what they were constructing, and they didn't put it in there for a number of reasons. The main one being that it's the same thing. It's the same problem in terms of why they did not put a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. I know you're going to claim that there's a Bill of Rights in there because it's like monkey see, monkey do, and whatever somebody says, all the parents get on board and start saying the same thing. But it's the same reason why you don't have impeachment offenses itemized in the Constitution, because to itemize it would then leave out some other things,
extraneous to the office and things that should not be done, and you would therefore restrict it from those things because you've itemized it only to be a list of these things over here. And so there's no itemization of impeachment offenses. Now, you might say then that because there's no itemization of offenses that are listed, that then the House can go kamikaze, Harry Carey, or whatever you want to call it, and just go crazy in terms of just bringing about the impeachment of everybody and doing it their own pledge and will. That doesn't work either because, as an excuse, because the Constitution is a check and balance system document. And there are checks and balances throughout the document as a way of checking on power, whatever source of power emanates from. And if you read it carefully, and I don't think people are reading it very carefully and making mistakes, they're making saying things like, these are impeachable offenses. You cannot be reading the Constitution carefully because it's very clear in the document where impeachment is in fact constructed in the document. There's nothing in the document that would say that you can impeach for this reason or that reason. That is left open to the impeachers. But there's a check on what they can do, not in terms of impeachment, because all impeachment is an official accusation while in office. Now, you cannot impeach once they leave office. And I'll tell you about that when we get to maybe another part of this discussion here, because I want to talk about why they impeached Donald Trump twice. And these were members of the Democratic Party who are not very democratic, as can be seen by the second impeachment. And I'll go into that hopefully before I get off the air, I get enough time to do that. But this idea that you must have certain itemized offenses that you can impeach for, or somebody like Mark Levine saying these are impeachable offenses, I don't know how they can read the Constitution and come up with that. Impeachment process, let's say, to impeach is the process that's spelled out in Article 1 of the Constitution. As you know, Article 1 sets up the legislative branch of government. And so we'll find in the legislative branch of government then the process of impeachment that's found there. But what you don't find there in Article 1, which is legislative branch of government, what you don't find there is the trial of impeachment. So that the impeachment can go on in the Article 1 provision, but trial goes on in the Article 2 provision. There's a reason for that as well. And the reason for that, I said that the entire document is a check and balance document. You have to keep in mind something here too. I didn't say this before. I should have maybe said this before I got into this part. And that is that you have to keep in mind the framers went to the Constitutional Convention to clean up, if you want to call it that, or to make the document that was already in place a more workable document. They didn't go there to throw out the document. That's something they determined to do once they got there, and all these minds are on deck. All of the 55 persons that had convened there, 39 of them will in fact stay until the end, and then certify the document for the states to in fact ratify. But the people that went there to in fact revise the Articles of Confederation, the 13 Articles of Confederation, and got there and determined that that was almost impossible to revise it because there were so many flaws in it that the revision would amount to a rewriting of the document. So they put the document to the side and decided to work on something else. And because of the ingenuousness of the people that were there, they wanted to maintain what the document that they were replacing was intended to do, which was restrain power. But now they had to figure out, having decided that this was unworkable, how to in fact do that by creating another document that would do it without having the disabling characteristics of the document they were throwing out. That's what they're discussing in that room. And I tell you this: not any of these professors today could be in that room and then discard a document as they did. What scholars could do that today? What university you think? And what professors? Lawrence tried, that would not be you. You don't even understand the document that they put in place. So you certainly could not have created the document. You can't even read the document, not based on what you're saying. That's also Alan Dershowitz' problem. And I call their names out because I listen to them and I know what they're saying is on this issue, that what they're saying is not true. And I'm here to correct them on it, because what they're saying is, I heard the same thing that I'm hearing from them that I heard in postgraduate school. And I objected to it then. And in all these seminars they've had since that time period. And it was amazing to me to hear it in my postgraduate work, because, you think of it, think of education as, you start out at a certain level. Most persons start out, I don't even have kindergarten now, but you start out and then you go up to another level, and you go to a level above that and and then you finally get to the point of graduation from the public school system, and then you start in the college level. You start at the lower tier up there, and you go up and so on. You expect to go up in terms of the information becoming much more definitive at the different levels in which the instructions is carried out. And I have not found it to always be the case in terms of this issue here. It was always very surprising to me to be in those classes where there was a tremendous amount of understanding of the court cases, and which is a parroting of lesser scholars than the ones that were in that room in Philadelphia. I mean, I don't know of anyone on the Supreme Court. I can't name anybody. I read their writings, and I know the ones that say were outstanding on the Supreme Court. And I don't know how you quantify, greatness, and how you describe the intellect on those courts as being something out of the norm. But I think my training is such that's commensurate with any training out here, and I don't see the training on the court, the scholarship on the court, that I see in that room. And I see it in a different way. The fact that so many of the court decisions are being reversed. And this stare decisis that you claim, where you say that the precedent should be followed. You should look at past precedent as a way of making determinations in the modern court cases. I don't know where that comes from either.
I can understand that perhaps maybe more criminal cases, like what they call a criminal defense. So this is an example. So the state to shoot up, you live in this law, you carry a firearm. And so what they do is, but the lawyer, if you do that, you carry without a license because the state doesn't allow it. Mm-hmm. But otherwise have no past, problems and all that. and also the situation required a lot of times, if you felt you needed to have that protection, you carried it, and it can make it what they call a further defense. So I can see that more, the precedent being set, like looking at other states' cases, about for a criminal case. But there's like, it goes down to where people basically, by the way I see this, they're going to like this idea of living constitution. And it's not a living constitution, it's a legal document.
Yeah, you see, the issue would be different with the Constitution. When they say they're going with the uh, uh, the idea of it being looking at the precedents the courts have had, I don't think you can use precedent as a way of determining whether a ruling will be overthrown. I know that's what they're saying. But folks, let me tell you something. There are many ways in which people claim to be practitioners and respecters of the Constitution, while at the same time and in the same breath dismissing it. The precedent set by the court's ruling is only to be overthrown and even looked at not because of the precedent, but if in fact what was ruled by the court was erroneous based upon what the Constitution required them to do in that ruling, and if they in fact did not get it right, you revisit it because now the constitutional question is more clear, and the argumentation of what the court should have done is more clear. And if they did not do that, you correct it based on the Constitution, not based upon the precedent. I'm saying that to all you scholars out here. When I was in those classes, I went to the same class you went to. I heard the same, well, the same, I don't mean the same people, but I heard the same arguments that you heard. And I heard the same arguments about impeachment. I raised my hand in those classes then, and I will still raise my hand if you say it out here, because I'm not going to let you do that, because this document is a serious document to be taken seriously, and you cannot take it seriously while amending it through what you speak. That's not how you amend it. They gave you a way to amend the Constitution to make it a document you can amend and you can alter so that it speaks to whatever they didn't speak to in the document. But you cannot alter it by your claiming that the president is such that you cannot go back and change the president because the president is wrong, and it does not really render, the verdict wasn't rendered based upon the constitutional mandates, and you cannot in fact prescribe to it if you know better than what was known at the time they made that ruling. Anytime, by the way, I'll say this, everybody talks about the Brown ruling. That's the most famous one. It was reversed. But there've been a lot of reversals now. That's not the only one. That's the one that's most famous. Anytime you put the word "but" in a ruling, that makes it unconstitutional. The Constitution does not speak in language. Get this point down. Biden, you get this down, because I'm mad at you. You don't come in front of the public and say things that you're saying that no amendment is absolute. I'm not a profane person, but I feel like cursing you out. And I don't use profanity. But you know what? That drives me close to the edge of that. because that is an attack upon the nation. It is. These are non-violent, well, maybe not even non-violent, but okay, no, you're not hitting anybody. Let me put it that way. These are very insidious attacks upon the country. Now, you may not see it as attacks, but the Constitution is written as an architectural plan of action for our government. And that's why they're not put in there the word maybe, and you won't find the word in there should. Now, what Biden is doing, because Biden is basically, how do I want to say this without being, I do respect the office he's in. I don't have respect for the man. I'm just like Dennis Prager on that level. He's the first president I've actually been, I loathe this man in the White House. This man is loathsome. What he's doing to this country.
He was attacking Martin Luther King too, and Sean Hannity. I don't know exactly what.
I like him already. Yeah, John. I'm not gonna let them get away with this. This is a violation of the country. I can't let them get away with that because the country stands. If you don't stand for something, you fall for everything. The country must stand upon the principles upon which it was founded. And the document, there are two documents in place here. The legal document, as opposed to the revolutionary document, it's not that document was thrown and cast aside, but the legal document upon which it's founded is the Constitution of the United States. You can't take that lightly and throw that and cast that to a side. As if the document can be explained out of existence by your refusal to accept what the document says, by you explaining it away from the text. When I hear people like Mark Levine, that's you, Mark Levine, I respect some things you're doing. I think that your heart is in the right place. But when you start saying the things you're saying, and I know you can't show it to me in this document right here, I'm going to call you on that without apology. This notion of, I think that these are impeachable offenses. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. And if you want to argue that, I'm going to tell you this, and you're not going to like this. You're not qualified to argue with me about the Constitution, and none of the other scholars are either. I was in those classes, and I was taught by those professors, but I also taught them something as well. I've been on this document since high school. And I did something I don't think anybody else has ever done. And that's I read the last one of the 85 fellows papers in high school. I guess that's what not having any lunch did for me. Every negative thing can be turned into a positive. I used the fact that I didn't have any lunch to go to the library. And there's no scholar in this country going to argue with me about the Constitution. I can tell you that right now. They're not going to do it. Cannot be done. And I dare them to try. What y'all are saying out here, you're not saying it based on the document. And that's why you're doing a lot of reversals, and you're talking about the precedent and using that as the basis of why it should not be reversed. That is not the basis of why things should not be reversed of rulings the court has made in the earlier time period. The only time the court should be overturned in what is stated is if it in fact does not meet the constitutional standard set in the written document, which is a static document written in explicit, specific language. That's why you see should in the document. That's why you see the word shall in the document. There's only two places where in the constitutional document where the word shall is not found. Don't tell me. Article 1, Section 5, and Amendment 10. Now, every other place in the Constitution of the United States, in every article, every section, and every clause, that's how serious it was for the framers. Nobody's ever said that. I'm saying it. They took this very seriously. They knew government. They knew it. They studied Greek history, Roman history, classical studies. These were learned people in that room. Philosophy. And they brought all that together in that room. And they're sitting there knowing a document cannot be made to work. It's too flawed. And they're in that room, not as those people, but these people in that room who were sent there. Why? Because of what David Halberstam wrote, a book called The Best and the Brightest. Not that he's talking about them necessarily, but they are the best and the brightest, and they sent them there. That's who's in that room. I want you to know that in case nobody's ever said that, and they're not appreciative of that fact. Then they knew that they had to send the heavyweights there. And that's who went there. To do what? To revise the document. Why? Because the ones that had drawn it up, it was not sufficient to get the job done, and they wanted the scholars, all the ones that they could mobilize in the nation, to go there and revise the document. That's who's there in that room. And they're in there with all this information, accumulative in every one of those persons. There's not one person in that room who is not a scholar. You can't find them at the universities now. You find one or two here, one or two there, and some lesser lights and all of that. In that room, you have the best and the brightest the country had to offer, and there have been none better than that. And I agree with Ayn Rand on this point. She's exactly right. You go read the background. I read the background of each person that was in that room. And they were there to do a job. Once they threw the document out, the job was then to create a document better than it was that would do the same thing this document sought to do without, in fact, debilitating power, so it cannot do anything, which is part of the job also. And how do you finesse that? You create a government strong enough to, in fact, act as an umbrella protection for all the states. At the same time, You don't want the government, which is set up to stop the bully, to become the bully that you stop by the setting up of government. Because government is a bully also. If you don't think it's a bully, if you don't think government is a bully, what do you think the government is doing to us now? All the government does is bully us. And we've got to, in fact, understand the bullying and deal with it before we lose the country. And we are losing the country, by the way. Because we got people up there. I'm writing about. I'm doing a 2-part series on my Facebook post now. I did a Mother's Day post yesterday, by the way, and I did some things with Mother's Day in memory of my own mom. But I did something on Mother's Day. Nobody has ever done either, in terms of calling the question there. But I am writing today a 2-part series on the abuse of power, and I'm calling Lindsey Graham out on this one because this man is dangerous. He might be the most dangerous person in Congress. Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. And I'll be dealing with him in part 2 of my post that I did today, in part 1 on Facebook. I'll be taking him on because I am not anyone stand without being challenged as hurt in this country. This man is hurt in this country with his total nonsense. You cannot dismiss this document, those of you who are doing it, as if what the framers said is not, what's the word here, clear, or no longer appropriate to the times. And therefore, through the word of mouth, I guess that's the way it is now, in terms of the word of mouth process, you will in fact amend it through the spoken word. You just simply don't agree with it anymore. Therefore, you're going to amend it by your disagreement. You know, you're amending it when you start talking about hate speech. I'm getting to hear that quite a bit. Hate speech is another another word. There's another but word, B-U-T word, in the reading of the Constitution.
There's always one side of it. The left can use all the inflammatory speech they choose. If you just say, I don't like that, or I don't think you're wrong on this, that's hate speech you can accept. They want to label you, push you for the firing squad, if you utter anything, mean spirited.
Yeah, that's right. And John, I call and I call it after out when they do that. What the right gets mad about is I called them out too. I don't care what side of the coin you fall on. I don't think either one of you are serious, either side, Democrats or Republicans. I don't see any sincerity. 1 or 2 up there that's sincere. Yeah.
It's a scam, man. They're all the same side. They're all the same. Basically, they're playing a role. That's exactly what they're playing a role.
Yeah, before
they say, give us your script, give us your script. They agreed on it, but they're not committed.
They're not committed to it, John. If they were committed to it, they would not allow the Article 4, Section 4 being destroyed, as they're doing. Article 4, Section 4 says that the government shall guarantee to each state a Republican form of government and protect the state against invasion. They're not only not doing that, they are encouraging the invasion. And once the invaders get here, busting into all the states. Every state right now in America, by the way, is a border state. And what that means is that every one of the persons in the government. There's not stopping the invasion of the country is in violation of the Constitution, and every last one of them is subject to removal based upon that alone.
At least 100 miles away from any border, from any international border. 100 miles is a long way. In the state of Michigan, we have, this takes us to the midsection, could be sharing not too far away from across the lake, across the river, from Sarnia and Windsor. So they could basically better half, and then better half of Michigan from the eastern sector, the east side of the state could be used as they could stop here randomly, border patrol.
Yeah.
That should be a fact on this.
I would like to see us return to the restraints placed upon power by the framers, because the framers had the idea of how the process should work. And I don't know of anyone, and I'm pretty much aware of a lot of the professorial standards that have been set by some of the so-called great professors and all of that. I do get the tapes of different professors at different universities. But I don't know of any of them that stand up well to the framers in their intellect. And I agree with, I said earlier, I agree with Ayn Rand. I think Ayn Rand was right in saying that they're the first intellectuals, and so far they're the last intellectuals that this country has produced. And I would carry that further than she did. She died, Ayn Rand died in 1982. And we're now that many years on this side of her having passed, but nothing has changed since that time period. And her statement about the framers being the first and so far the last intellectual still stands today. I don't know if I'm disarrogating intellectuals from scholars. We have a lot of scholars. Intellectuals is something very different. And I don't think you can put in these scholars in that room and come up with a document that would trump this document or even come close to it. That's what scholars did. That's what intellectuals did, not scholars. What scholars do is pretty much parrot. I mean, it's a literacy thing with them. And sometimes even that is a chore, as can be seen by the fact that they misinterpret the document quite a bit. They misread it and infer things that were not there. It didn't just happen recently, by the way, in terms of the Supreme Court saying separate but equal in 1896. That "but" in there is a problem, and so is this modification of this modifying of specific language. That's also an amendment of the Constitution, because when you start saying hate speech and you modify speech with hate, as if hate speech can therefore cancel out the amendment, or to do what was done in 1921, was it, around that time period, when Oliver Wendell Holmes was supposed to be one of the great jurors on the court. That's what that's what they teach in the postgraduate level, a great jurist. I went back to read about him, because you say that I had to go to the library and I didn't know anything. I didn't know. I mean, I knew what he said. I didn't know how. When they say great, I had to go and read about it. And I went and did that. And Oliver Wendell Holmes was the one that came up with you can limit speech because you can't scream fire you can't holler fire in a crowded theater. And he thought that was a speech issue, as a way of rendering a limitation upon the First Amendment. That's not a speech issue. I know they think it's a speech issue. And they're wrong about that too. It's not a speech issue. It's a property and contract issue. I tell you another thing. If I go to a concert and you stand up in there and start reading the Gettysburg Address, that's not going to be tolerated either. You know why? Because I put $38.50 down there to go to that concert or go to that boxing match. And probably that pretty much be where I would be at some boxing event. I'm not into too much music these days. But anytime I go in there and put down the money for a ticket, and the ticket has on it what is supposed to happen there, that's a contract that's been established. When you go to the movie theater, I want you to see something that you have probably not seen. That officer is in that theater at the theater to make sure that that movie that's being paid for will in fact be shown without interruption. And if there's interruption, that person doing the interruption be taken out of there because that contract has to be enforced. That's what he's there for, to enforce the contract. You have made a contract with the proprietor. The contract is that the contract is so specific, you can actually tell the time in which the invocation of the contract will occur. That's what they put up there. The showings will be 1:30, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever the time period. Because it's a contract. Now, if you go in there at 1 o'clock and that movie starts at 5, you go get your money back. Because the contract does not allow that. That movie ticket has a time on it. I'm just telling you that they're wrong in saying that howling fire is a speech issue. It's not a speech issue. They made it a speech issue because they want to try to countermand what the framers did in that room. That's all this is about. That is all that's going on here. They don't believe in this document. If they believed in it, they would read it, understand it, and if they don't understand it, do not get out here in the public and do what they're doing, which is misrepresenting the document. I think these may be impeachable offenses. Pure and total and absolute nonsense. You can't say things like that. And I heard it, and I didn't hear it here for the first time. I heard it back in postgraduate school. I heard it. I objected to that. You can't say that and be respectful of this document. Cannot be said. There's no such thing. And if they can't show it to me because it doesn't exist. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, not the same as Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2. I'm talking here about Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. And it says in that clause, the House, it says other things too, but it says the House shall have the sole power of impeachment. And it doesn't say anything else about it in that section of the Constitution. It doesn't itemize anything. It doesn't list anything. It just simply tells you the process, the sole power of impeachment. And they understand that you would have to go and read about what is impeachment. Who is qualified to make the official accusation. That's what that is about. That's all it's about. Who is qualified to make the official accusation? The president can't do it. The courts can't do it. The Senate can't do it. The document says The House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. Why? Because by putting it in the House, it is to put it in the people's hands. They're not going to say anything. And I'm going to tell them why they're not going to say anything. You're not qualified. I'm sorry, you're not. I just listen to you, all of you. And what you're saying, I don't know. I don't even know where this training comes from. I don't really think it's a training much. Maybe it is a training too. But I think it's a certain amount of arrogance too. That they think they get these degrees and they can bend the language to what they think it should be. I'm going to bring something in here next week to show you that too. There was something I read in the Huffington Post. I'll bring that in. I'll try to remember where I found that. I know I'll be able to find it because I put it in my. I download a lot of things and keep it so that I can have it for future reference. And I'll try to make sure I bring that. I will make sure I bring that. But you cannot say things they're saying, and I think they're saying it a little bit on the arrogant side because some of these scholars believe that if they get a PhD degree, first of all, they think they're doctors. They insist on being called doctors. You know, you're not a doctor. These are abuses of language. I have a doctorate degree, but I do not have a doctorate in medicine. I am not a doctor. A doctor is a medical official. And in fact, there's a guy out there, he's not around with us now. I mean, he's deceased. But there's a guy out there named Dr. Sebi. S-E-B, I think he spelled his name S-E-B-I. And he was a herbalist. And because he was an expert in medicine, and he cured. He was a practitioner. He's a herbalist, and they call him Dr. Sebi. I'm aware of him. I've read his work, and if I met him, I would call him doctor. Now, when I'm in the university, I'll use that terminology inside the university. But I know when I'm using that term, I'm misusing the term, but I will give them that because the university language is such. But they're not doctors. They have doctorate degrees. There's a difference. So they think because they have the degrees, I think this is what their thinking is, that they don't have to respect lesser lights. And they can, in fact, go behind them and change it because they are professorial enough to be able to dictate to the document. And that's a total reversal of what the Constitution is. The dictation is the document itself. You cannot dictate to it. You dictate from it based upon what's written there. And all of the stuff you're saying, like it's a living document, that's because you want to put the document in your mouth. You think you're better qualified to do a reinterpretation, so it's living, so it can live through how you're going to recreate it in your understanding of what it ought to say. Which is a process. You see, the genius of that room is allowed that to be carried out through a process they created. Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah.
I mean, but the core of the Constitution is to actually to preserve individual liberty and to keep the government
from going helter skelter. John, you're making the point exactly. The point is exactly what you're saying. You don't want people jumping around, so the law is always being expanded, so that you don't know where you throw that dot at the dot board. How many times can you hit that dot board that you throw it and then the dot board then moves? You don't want to have a living document, because if you can move the document around, it gets so you can't find what the document where it is on any issue, because it's constantly changing its location and being somewhere that it wasn't yesterday. Today it's in a different place based on the whims of the people that's making the interpretation. That's not the intention. That word "shall" that's in every part of the Constitution, article, section, and clause, except in 2 places in the Constitution. Go read it for yourself. You'll see it there. Shall. If you move your head every time it says shall, you have a whiplash. They put it there because they were commanding the government to. Because the document orders the government to act. It doesn't ask them to act. It orders them to act. The framers knew that you had to compel government. Why? Because they will power. They're the wheels of power. And they get drunk with it because they think they can wield it and mold it in the way they see fit to do it, and don't have to respect the language. So the framers wanted to make sure it didn't do that. That's the genius of them correcting the articles. The articles didn't let them do anything. That doesn't work. You need a functioning government. But you have to also do the other thing that the document is set out to do. Restrain power so it doesn't go out of control. That's what the articles did, but it can't go out of control if it's restrained from acting. So that doesn't work, because there's a time for it to be where it has to act. So the question is, how do you do both? That's in that room there. That's what they did in that room. And nobody since that time, that's 1787, when they finished the document up, that was September the 17th. I'm thinking of, I'm making sure I get my dates straight. I don't give any bad information out here. That was the 17th of September, 1787. Started June 25th. I want to be specific in my dates, because if I get the dates wrong, then I'm doing what I'm accusing them of doing. I'm not going to do that. If I can help it, and I can't help it, because I got a pretty good memory, even at my old age, as they say. But I will tell you that you cannot amend this document without going through Article 5. You can't do it. You can't do it out here, folks. That's not the intention. The intention was there might be a time when a document needs to be fixed. Since it's not a living document, there might be a time when it does not speak to some things it ought to have spoken to, because the times will in fact change. But when the times change, you have to alter the document through the amendment process. That's what they intended to do then in that room. They understood they were not omniscient. They knew that. So what they did was to, as they said in the preamble, do ordain and this Constitution for ourselves and our posterity. They were doing the same thing that I saw in Egypt. They were standing in the moment, looking at the past, and also were looking toward the future. I saw that in a temple in Egypt when I was there with the two-headed god of Egypt, Osiris, standing in the moment and then looking in both directions, past and present, setting the present, past, and future. And they were doing that in that room. They were looking at what was needed now, but knowing that times do change and there is a need for an amendment process, which they, by the way, they used it in their own lifetime, because 3 years later they're back at the table amending the document, basically to satisfy George Mason. Really, the document already had limited power, but they wanted to bring it out and further specifically make it so that power was restrained under more restricted terminology. That's all it does. It doesn't give you a Bill of Rights. It's just further restraining power, which is what the 10 Amendments do. If you look at it, you'll see that that's what the intent was. And this Bill of Rights stuff, you can get out of here with that right now. The framers were too smart to be talking about itemizing people's rights. Now, when he said in the Declaration of Independence, inalienable rights, and how do you itemize inalienable rights? One of which is, by the way, the right to be born. That's inalienable. And on the Mother's Day, you were celebrating that. I had my wife has 2 sons, and I knew what was going to happen yesterday, and I knew the ones in the city. We knew he's going to be over to the house. He's my stepson. I told him, "No, you'll try that next month. Any flowers you give me, you give them to me at my funeral." I'm not sentimental type. And so I don't know. He came over there yesterday. I told him, "No, come over here next month." He said, "What's next month?" I said, "Go figure it out, but don't come over here." And then the day they knocked on the door, and there was a guy bringing a car out there. My wife didn't recognize the car, and the car told me to go to the door. Man was at the door. The man was there with some flowers because my stepson down in Houston sent some flowers. I knew they're gonna do that. They're gonna recognize their mom. They're gonna do that, and I didn't have to teach that. They knew to do that. But all those persons putting this "but" in there and all that, these words you're modifying. Let me tell you something. This document does not allow that. And if I'm around you and you do that, I'm not going to allow it either. I have too much respect for the framers in that room and for the country for which this document stands to allow that to happen. And Biden, you're not going to do it either. I'm just saying. Okay, I gotta get out of here. I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.